I want to welcome everybody. I am Nena Torres, as Henry said. I teach at the University of Illinois in Chicago. I think some of my students are here. And we're a little emotional tonight because obviously this is very close to home. I am Cuban as well as Henry. We're kindred spirits because we actually were raised in Texas. But it is, as when Henry invited me to do this, I sort of thought, okay, Shakespeare in Cuba, yes, there's universal truths, but the closer that we got to it, the more I realized what a genius stroke he had hit in bringing really Shakespeare to the situation, our personal situation, and our contemporary situation in Cuba. And the ending, as you will see, and hopefully Claudia will talk about, is something that hits very close to home, particularly for Claudia Hidalgo, who is with us here tonight. She was one of the founders of the San Isidro Movement that she will talk about, and also the curator and partner of Luis Manuel Otera Alcántara, who was condemned to 5 years in jail for basically doing what many of us do on a day-to-day basis here in the United States when we protest things that we don't like, or when we create works of art that are confrontational. And so I'm very pleased and honored that Claudia is joining us today. What I thought we could do tonight is have Henry talk a little bit about how he put this together, right? And then have Claudia talk to us about what this has meant for her and share with us some of her own experiences. So, Henry, I'm going to turn it over to you. I don't think Henry Godinez needs introduction, but he is the director of the play, has been the director of many, many other plays as well at the Goodman and multiple other, I think it's in your program, so I don't have to repeat all that. He's also chair of the department, the theater department at Northwestern University. And I should just say, before turning it over, this tonight is sponsored by Northwestern University, University of Illinois, and obviously the Shakespeare Theater. So, Henry, with that, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nena. Sure. It's being recorded. Thank you. Thanks, Nena. When Barbara Gaines approached me about directing this play, I immediately started thinking about Cuba. I started thinking about all of the themes in this play of authoritarianism, of oppression, and hypocrisy. And it just seemed like the perfect world for this play. And I was so blessed to have an incredible creative team. All of the visuals that you saw are by Davante Johnson, who was our scenic designer, projections designer. The music, incredible music, originally composed by the great Orbert Davis, who we're lucky to have with us right here tonight. Co-composed with a young man on the island of Cuba who can't be here with us tonight, that Orbert has been mentoring, Jorge Molina, who will be here at some point because he is one of several young Cuban musicians that Orbert has been mentoring and has just fought incredibly ferociously to bring to Chicago to go to graduate school, and that's a Herculean task. Orbert, thank you. So for me, this production was, when I thought about this play, it had to be rooted in the 1950s and before the revolution and the hypocrisy of the Batista dictatorship, but also my experience of the hypocrisy of the revolution. And I started thinking about the young people on the island today that are so bravely speaking out against the racism that the revolution was supposed to eradicate, and the appropriation of Cuban culture that it was supposed to, get rid of, specifically as personified by the young raperos, the young black rappers on the east end of the island in Santiago de Cuba, but also by the San Isidro Movement, which is a group of scholars and artists and intellectuals in Cuba that rose up especially last summer, in the summer of 21, and like it had never happened before. So those were my inspiration for this production. And as you can see from the final montage in the video, specifically Luis Manuel Otero, that Nena referenced, who is an artist who, as a way of speaking out against this law in Cuba that you can only use the flag in certain ways, draped it around himself for a performance and is now imprisoned for 5 years because of that, for doing the very thing that we do every night on this stage. And so it's an incredible honor to have Claudia here with us tonight, who is his partner, who was with him when he was arrested, was beaten like he was. And so thank you, Claudia, for being here. Gracias por estando aquí con nosotros esta noche. This is Betty. Betty will be translating for us.
Bueno, ante todo, gracias por estar acá. Gracias por acogerme aquí. Y sobre todo, gracias por esta obra maravillosa. Ahora soy un poco víctima de la emoción de verla. Hay verdades que siempre duelen y estos recuerdos indiscutiblemente son bien fuertes para mí en lo personal.
She wants to thank us all for embracing her and welcoming her here. This has been a difficult time for her because these are very painful memories that this is bringing back, but she's very grateful for the warm welcome that she's received here.
Entender Cuba hoy y sobre todo lo que ha pasado en el último tiempo. Tú hablabas, en la obra hablan del movimiento San Isidro y de lo que ha sido el movimiento San Isidro. Primero me gustaría hablar un poco de lo que es el movimiento San Isidro y por qué creo que es importante entender qué es, qué fue y qué seguirá siendo. El movimiento...
So first she wants to explain about the San Isidro movement, what it means to her, what it means to the island.
El movimiento San Isidro es un movimiento integrado por artistas, intelectuales, que en el año 2018 se unieron para protestar contra un decreto que implantó el gobierno cubano para censurar el arte.
So the San Isidro movement has its origins in protests of 2018 by artists on the island who were resisting the suppression of their art.
Y es que la base de todo lo que se hizo desde el movimiento San Isidro, justamente para generar esa ruptura de la barrera del miedo, generar ese pensamiento crítico en la gente cubana, en el pueblo cubano, en la sociedad civil cubana, provino especialmente de las acciones que se hacían desde el arte y con el arte.
So the movement was the focus of the movement was to counter the suppression of artistic expression, which was intended to keep people from rising up, from joining together and resisting the oppression of the government.
Y es que creo que indiscutiblemente el arte es un lenguaje universal.
Art is a universal language.
Y eso fue lo que nos conectó dentro de Cuba y creo que en alguna medida es lo que nos sigue conectando y un ejemplo es lo que acabamos de ver ahora.
And that is what connected us then, what continues to connect us today, and what this piece that we've seen this evening expresses.
Es difícil contar cómo es la represión en Cuba para el arte y para los artistas que asumen una posición crítica desde el propio arte, desde el propio accionar.
It's very difficult to convey the suppression that they're experiencing in Cuba to keep down artistic expression and keep people from sharing it with each other.
Más allá de las campañas difamatorias, hay muchos artistas implicados, como es el caso de Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara, que tienen una trayectoria dentro de la creación en Cuba.
beyond the people in the city, there are artists all over the country who are experiencing the same kind of suppression. And the problem is that they're not allowed to interact with each other, because if they were permitted to interact with each other, there would be more resistance.
Luis, su obra, siempre se ha caracterizado por asumir esa postura crítica que en un momento determinado fue considerada demasiado ofensiva para el gobierno.
So Luis's art has had its basis always in criticism of the authority, and that is why he has been suppressed and why he's perceived to be so dangerous by the government.
Creo que una manera más que de explicar, sino de evidenciar cómo se fue desarrollando esta censura, es justamente el video que quería mostrar.
Okay, as an example of the censorship that he experienced, we have some videos today to show you about the kind of things that were suppressed.
En el año 2021, para explicar un poco el contexto donde se desarrollan estos hechos, en el año 2021, Luis decide hacer una exposición de dibujos.
So to give further context, in 2021, he planned an exhibition of certain drawings.
Esta exposición la iba a exponer en su casa, en San Isidro, un lugar de La Habana Vieja.
These drawings were going to be exhibited in his home in San Isidro, which is part of Old Havana.
Eran dibujos relacionados con el tema fundamental, eran las frustraciones en la infancia para adquirir determinados objetos, determinados deseos de los niños dentro de Cuba debido a las circunstancias económicas y políticas.
So the objective was to demonstrate the frustration that children had in experiencing what was going on in Cuba and the pain.
Esta exposición fue prohibida y como consecuencia Luis hizo un performance de protesta.
So this exhibition was prohibited, and as a consequence, he decided in protest to show it in his home.
La reacción del gobierno ante esta obra de arte fue lo que vamos a ver ahí en el video.
So this video will show what the government's reaction was to this protest.
This is Luis Manuel. And this is your work. Lo que acaban de ver es la seguridad del Estado vestida de civil entrando a su casa.
So what you've just seen is the state security force dressed in plain clothes coming into his house to arrest him.
Rompiendo sus obras, los dibujos que estaban en las paredes.
Destroying his artwork that was on his walls.
Y deteniéndolo a él y a los otros vecinos que estaban en su casa en ese momento.
And detaining him and the other neighbors who were there for the exhibition.
Más allá de lo que está sucediendo ahora con Luis Manuel, que está preso desde el 11 de julio.
He has since been arrested and remained in prison since July 11th.
Esta es una de las violaciones más grandes que le han hecho durante todo el tiempo de represión.
One of the worst assaults that they have made on him since the period of repression.
Simplemente por ser consecuente con lo que piensa.
Simply as a consequence of what he thinks, what he believes, and what he expresses.
Por creer que Cuba necesita un cambio para bien.
Or believing that Cuba needs a change for the better.
Y sobre todo por hacer arte.
And above all, for being an artist.
En estos momentos está preso, hace más de un año, condenado a 5 años.
He has been in prison for a year and has been condemned to a 5-year sentence.
Por hacer el performance que hace referencia a la obra que vimos hoy en una de sus últimas escenas.
For simply performing his art, the one that was referenced here in the piece this evening.
Para el gobierno cubano, llevar la bandera sobre los hombros como su segunda piel, que fue el eslogan de esta obra.
To wear the flag as a second skin, as a cape.
Fue considerado una ofensa lo suficientemente grande como para condenarlo.
Was sufficiently bad to be the basis for condemning him.
Es difícil explicar y más que nada hacer que cuando no conocemos realmente lo que está sucediendo hoy día en Cuba, entendamos esta realidad.
It's very difficult to convey what people are going through in Cuba.
Por eso, en nombre de Luis, en nombre de muchos cubanos, creo que se hace extremadamente importante buscar y sobre todo estar conscientes de la realidad. Una realidad que tenemos que buscar por nosotros mismos, más allá de cualquier construcción, de cualquier imagen que nos proyecten.
It's very important for us to convey what they're experiencing there, more important than any particular image that we're going to show you this evening.
Por eso agradezco eventos como este, donde se toma una obra así como referencia y sobre todo por crear espacios que pueden servir a la denuncia, siempre desde el arte.
Which is why she's so grateful to be welcomed here this evening and to have the opportunity to demonstrate these images and these performances, which means so much.
Hoy hablaba con Luis y él siempre me repite algo en cada una de sus llamadas.
She spoke to Luis this evening and he repeated something that he tells her every time they speak.
Siempre me dice, el arte es lo único que me va a salvar, el arte es lo único que nos va a salvar.
Art is the only thing that will save me, and art is the only thing that will save us.
Puede sonar abstracto, pero es una gotica de esperanza en medio de tanto dolor.
It may sound abstract, but it's a little drop of truth that sustains these people during what they're going through.
Nada, gracias una vez más.
Okay. Gracias, Claudia, and Henry, obviamente. I wanted to also thank the artists today again. We've all been working very closely, but you really brought you brought it home and really touched our hearts. So we should, for the artists today, their performances, Hey, thank you. I think that we should open it up for questions. I think Claudia's, not only her personal testimony, but her analysis and understanding of what's going on in Cuba is very valuable. So if you have questions or questions to Henry about how he thought about this, thank you, Betty, for the translations. So please, questions?
Bueno, respondiendo a la primera pregunta, después del 11 de julio, la represión ha aumentado considerablemente. No solo para personas que ya mantenían una postura abierta de crítica al sistema, sino también para personas que simplemente ejercían su derecho a la libertad de expresión. Estamos hablando de leyes que censuran un comentario en Facebook. Por ejemplo, la ley 370, que fue implementada el año pasado y por la cual muchos de nosotros, pero también otras personas que no mantenían una postura crítica, tienen la amenaza constante de ser encarcelados hasta 8 años de privación de libertad.
So the situation since July 11th has gotten much worse in the sense that there is much more aggressive suppression of any kind of criticism of the government. And censorship of any kind of criticism.
Well, specifically that there is a law that was passed that says that you say anything in Facebook that can be considered against the government, it's an 8-year. I would add here, if I'm going to jump in just a minute, I think that repression has been there all along. And I think part of what touches us, Henry and I, is that we saw our parents go through this, and what Claudia's going through now is something that has been repeated over and over again. Obama's visit, the day before Obama was there, 361, I believe, people were arrested, dissidents. And Obama's visit, while it opened up and it created certain hope, it also increased the repression.
I think that oppression is oppression, and that the line between dictatorship and authoritarianism is very thin. And I think that the kind of repression that Batista utilized to maintain power is not unlike, to me, the kind of repression and oppression that the revolution in the form of Fidel Castro, Raúl, all the way to now, is used. And I think that, unfortunately, we're seeing that around the world. Specifically in Iran. My assistant director is a wonderful young Iranian grad student from Northwestern, just graduated. And so that, the whole time that we were rehearsing and in tech, he was following the uprisings on his phone in Iran, where his mother and his father and his sister still live. So it was very real for him, and it was unbelievable to see the parallel there. And so that's why in the final video montage, you see not only, images of repression in Cuba, you see the uprisings that are happening in Iran right now with being led by women, young women that are refusing to wear the hijab. And so it's everywhere.
Yo creo que cuando analizamos todo lo que ha sucedido, sobre todo el 11 de julio, que es un punto de referencia indiscutible para pensarnos que Cuba está cambiando, ha sido, o fue, y sigue siendo, el acceso a la información, el acceso a conectarse con el otro independientemente de donde esté, ya sea en Cuba, en cualquiera de sus provincias o fuera de Cuba.
One of the most important driving forces of this movement has been the access to information and the ability to connect with each other. And you can't overestimate the importance of internet access and what it has meant to this movement and the ability of these artists and people to connect with each other and do something about their situation.
Algo que creo que en el gobierno cubano ha intentado durante muchísimos años, más de 60 años diría yo, es justamente el aislamiento.
So the government for the last 60 years has really depended on alienating people from each other, keeping them from each other, isolating them to keep them from any kind of shared movement in response.
Y con el aislamiento, el miedo también a ser aislado.
And with this isolation is also a fear of remaining isolated, which kind of keeps people in bondage.
El acceso a Internet justamente rompió esa barrera.
Access to the internet really broke this barrier.
El que yo comentaba ayer cuando me reunía con unos amigos acá, justamente cómo a partir del acceso justamente a Internet se deconstruyó también esa imagen que se había tratado de imponer de lo que era ser un opositor dentro de Cuba.
The other result of access to the internet has been to break down the stigma of being an opposition to authority. People now recognize a positive value in rising up.
Eso, por supuesto, que también facilitó, o sea, la comunicación, la conexión entre los diferentes focos de oposición, pero también de artistas que pensaban diferente y no hacían una oposición frontal, pero sí tenían un criterio que podría ser diferente de los que se trata de imponer todo el tiempo dentro de Cuba.
So this has enabled not just political opposition to gel and express itself, but it has really promoted artistic expression and artistic views that lead to galvanizing opposition.
Por ejemplo, el movimiento San Isidro comenzaron siendo alrededor de 10, 12 personas.
So the San Isidro Movement started out as 10 to 12 people.
Y en estos momentos, incluso hay personas cruzando frontera que dicen que son del movimiento San Isidro porque se sienten parte de y se sintieron parte de cuando salieron el 11 de julio.
There are people now, many people who consider themselves to be part of the movement, even people who have left and crossed borders to go to other places.
Y es que el movimiento San Isidro se convirtió más que en algo específico, en algo que se sentía, y era el sentir que el otro forma parte o piensa o me va a apoyar o tengo su confianza también para poder hacer algo.
The movement has really led to a kind of group identification where you have a sense that other people are experiencing what you're experiencing and have the same objectives that you have.
Fue justamente lo que me sucedió a mí también en el año 2018 cuando decidí formar parte del movimiento San Isidro.
That's also what happened to her in 2018 when she decided to become part of the movement.
Yo dirigía una galería de arte contemporánea en La Habana, institucional.
She was the director of a contemporary art gallery in Havana.
Y cuando comencé a ver las primeras acciones que hacían Luis Manuel, Yanelis Núñez, Amaury Pacheco en el espacio público y esa unión por tratar de eliminar una ley que nos censuraba.
When she began to see these artistic expressions by a series of artists that she named, she felt like this was an important movement that she could help support. Public.
Sentí que no estaba sola, que lo que se podía considerar mis locuras dentro de la institución, por no plegarme a lo que decía el sistema, o sea, tenía a alguien que pensaba como yo y sobre todo alguien que estaba dispuesto a hacer algo real, paso a paso, para conseguir eso que queríamos.
She realized that there were other people who thought the way that she did and who were willing to express themselves publicly, and that this was more of a shared experience and not just her personal thoughts.
Creo que eso mismo lo sintió mucha gente dentro de Cuba y también lo ha sentido mucha gente fuera de Cuba. Y un ejemplo es que todos los que están acá hoy también se sintieron parte de eso, aún sin estar dentro de Cuba.
So this kind of shared experience, she not only experienced in Cuba, but this performance this evening is another example of people sharing the same views and living them.
Es que otra cosa que aprendimos siendo parte de lo que fue el movimiento San Isidro, y hablo de esto porque Silvia me preguntaba sobre mi experiencia, sobre mi historia, es que tenemos que ser capaces de construir desde nuestra individualidad.
We have to be able to bring our individual qualities to any movement like this that we're a part of. And this, relates to the question that Sylvia asked about what her personal experience and how it has impacted this.
Eso más allá, por supuesto, del trabajo por el otro, pero siempre avanzando desde nuestra posición.
It's not just thinking about other people's experience, but how collectively people advance their position with these actions.
Eso nos dio fortalezas para que, por ejemplo, hoy, independientemente de donde estemos cada uno de los fundadores o no del movimiento San Isidro, podamos seguir conectando a otras personas y sobre todo aclarando qué es lo que necesitamos y qué es lo que sucede dentro de Cuba.
So this is what gives the founders of this movement the strength to go out and do things like this and explain to people how they can help keep this movement strong and growing.
Silvia también me preguntaba sobre la posición de tener que salir de Cuba. Yo comentaba que por supuesto que en algún momento de la vida me hubiese gustado viajar, pero nunca me pensé el exilio, nunca pensé vivir fuera de Cuba como una opción.
Sylvia asked about the ramifications of leaving Cuba and the prospect of exile. And while she always hoped to travel, she never really intended to leave. And she still doesn't consider herself an exile. Her home is still in Cuba.
De hecho, yo no me considero exiliada.
Yeah, that's what she said this last night, so I was jumping the gun.
Creo que nadie tiene el derecho para decirnos que debemos estar fuera de nuestra casa.
No one has the right to tell her that she has to be away from her home. Cuba is still her home.
I think that we are being told that that's the end of our time here. I want to thank Claudia for being here with us, taking the leap of faith of a phone call that and asking her to come up. Henry, everybody here at Shakespeare audience, and the actors. I mean, you opened our hearts and brought our tears out. So thank you.